Well, some sad news from the music world. Rick Davies, the lead singer and co-founder of Supertramp, has died.
It was an early morning yesterday.
Well, Davies died following a decade-long battle with blood cancer. He and bandmate Roger Hodgson formed Supertramp in 1969. The British band's 1979 album, Breakfast in America, topped charts in Canada and in the United States, winning 2 Grammys and selling over 18 million copies. Davies was 81 years old. And joining us live to talk about the legacy of Rick Davies is music commentator Eric Alper, and my friend who we always tend to chat on these terrible days when we lose these great musicians, but talk about a voice and just an incredible artist who just created some of these songs that are no doubt going to last the test of time.
Yeah, and they already have. You know, if you're of a certain age that most of the viewers are, you've always heard Supertramp on the radio. You know, in fact, back in 1974, when their Crime of the Century album was released with Bloody Well Right and Dreamer hitting both the top 20 here in Canada and around the world, they've never left the radio, because after that, they had that huge album, Breakfast in America. And when radio was more hit-driven, you heard those songs all the time with Give a Little Bit and The Logical Song and Take the Long Way Home and Goodbye Stranger. Then when radio kind of went to classic rock in the 90s and 2000s, well, Supertramp was all over that too. So, you know, this is one of those songwriting relationships between Ray Davies and Roger Hodgson that had a dynamic like John Lennon and Paul McCartney. They just, for a number of years, was just writing hit after hit after hit. And you're right, we're going to hear those songs forever.
You talked about some of those hits, Take the Long Way Home, Logical Song, Bloody Well Right. I found with Supertramp, it was a band that was hard to kind of pin down and put into one box. But if it was a box, it would be like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, especially when I don't think anybody would have bet that Supertramp would be the biggest selling group, or at least one of them, in the 1970s. In fact, their first 2 records didn't really do so well. But this country, in Canada, specifically Montreal, really broke them worldwide. In fact, along with Genesis and Styx and a number of other prog rock bands that developed more of a pop sound, they kind of broke here, and that led to, you know, worldwide touring. And of course, like all bands, it's really, really hard to keep them together. And there was a lot of internal strife that had to do with money between each of the members, and the band split up in the later on. But, you know, Rick Davies continued to tour under the Supertramp name, performing up until his illness, and then unfortunately passing away yesterday at the age of 81.
Eric, you just mentioned Genesis and Styx, you know, a couple of prog rock bands who, you know, at times would cross over into pop. And the one thing about those bands is there was just a higher level of musicianship. These were very technical players. And when you look at some of these songs that had these incredible musical intros, like my favorite, Take the Long Way Home, which has this haunting intro, and then Davies rips in with this incredible harmonica, a diatonic harmonica, and other songs like Bloody Well Right, that just kind of set the tone for these songs that just exploded about a minute into it. And talk a little bit about that, how bands like that just kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack because of just the level of musicianship and the quality of their playing.
As awful as this is going to sound, we will never hear that kind of music again. You know, with the average listener on Spotify having a grand total of 7 seconds to decide whether or not if they're going to skip the next song or not, these artists, and I'll throw the band Yes in there included, I mean, they would take 3 minutes to get to the first verse in some cases. So it was definitely a listening experience, one that had to do with repeated listenings, with sitting down at the vinyl record, reading the liner notes, reading the lyrics, trying to figure out what on earth they're talking about. But realistically, you know, those 6-minute songs were on AM radio. That was the norm. And we will never have that again with the average length right now of a hit of being about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I mean, that's a harmonica intro to some of these bands, including Supertramp.
And just to see just the variety of the kind of songs that they produced, you listen to a song like Give a Little Bit that has these orchestral 12-string guitars recorded on top of each other, but then you have this kind of very rough and sounding Bloody Well Right intro that breaks down into one of the most British-sounding choruses I think I've ever heard. Right, you bloody well right. It's just something so unique about this band, and obviously just a very sad day for many music fans of Supertramp.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were listening to the Beatles just as much as anybody else, and that's where the whole John Lennon, Paul McCartney vibe comes in, where Rick Davies seemed to be more, straightforward, and Roger Hodgson was the kind of inspirational one. He was the romantic one, but together, like some of the best bands ever, they just managed to make it work for a number of years.
Well, don't be surprised if you hear a lot of Breakfast in America or Crime of the Century being cranked if you're stuck in traffic today. Eric Alper, always great to chat with you on these sad days, but it's a good day to reflect on this incredible musician's legacy. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. We'll talk soon.